I play a character named LeFou in Beauty and the Beast. LeFou is sort of the sidekick to the main antagonist in the film, played by Luke Evans, named Gaston. And the two of them are sort of coming back from, war. And Gaston is this very central figure in this community, in this French village. And LeFou is almost a historian celebrating his legacy and always there to remind the public how important his contributions were. It's sort of like if Napoleon Bonaparte had a little sidekick, this would be him. Right, well, I think that there's that sort of second golden age of Disney animation from Little Mermaid to Lion King, which includes Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin, that was such a pivotal part of my childhood. And I think that a big part of the reason that those movies work is because the music is so instantaneously classic. I mean, you can't leave the theater without those songs becoming immediately iconic and a part of your musical vocabulary. So when those films came out, whether it was songs like Be Our Guest or Under the Sea or Gaston, you would sing them. I remember going to school and that everybody would be singing and humming those songs. And it's rare that you get to be a part of a legacy like that. If you do one, that's impressive. But for the Menken and Ashman collaboration to have produced at least 3 of the most iconic scores of all time, I think it's one of the great accomplishments of film. The beauty, no pun intended, of Bill Condon is that he's a very intimate director, right? So many of his films have an intimacy to them that begins with a character study, that begins with, the characters being fully fleshed and realized characters, and it builds around that. So to do a big tent pole like this with, these incredible sets and this epic wonderment that comes with it, to have somebody like Bill Condon who grounds it all with these amazingly fleshed out characters and make sure that the intimate moments are what the audience really leaves with an emotional response to, that's everything for him. And I think that makes for a very impressive fusion of big spectacle and having that emotional response that a movie like this warrants. What I wanted to do was make sure that this character wasn't necessarily a carbon copy of what he is in the original movie. Because in the original movie, because it's a cartoon, you can get away with a lot more broad comedy. And, he gets his teeth knocked out and he gets burnt and he gets thrown. And there's a lot of crazy physical comedy that I don't necessarily think translates to this version of the film. So it was about figuring out, how do we change things up? How do we make him more human, right? And that came with a question of conscience for me. That's where it all started, where I said to Bill, what if it's not as cut and dry as it is in the original? What if he does have questions, this idea of false idolatry or false worship? What does that look like in this particular case? If a guy who he's admired for all these years without questioning is doing things that he has to bring into question, I think that creates for conflict, and that creates for a more interesting 3-dimensionalized version of this character. All of us got in here about a month before cameras started rolling, and, usually a rehearsal process for a film, it ranges between 2 weeks and, sometimes even a week or a few days. Beauty and the Beast was not one of those, was definitely an exception to that. We got here about a month before, and immediately, like you would prepare for, a musical theater piece, we were in a rehearsal space in our sweatpants, and we were going to town. Our brilliant choreographer, Anthony, he really did an amazing job of creating these iconic songs from scratch and giving us input into that process. And so with a song like Gaston, it was all mapped out beforehand, but when we got in the room, there was so much space for discovery. And coming from musical theater myself, from things like Spelling Bee and Book of Mormon, it was an amazing fusion of two of my passions, which are doing musical theater and, of course, doing film, and creating this song for the cameras was a very interesting journey and a very amazing process.